Whoa, hey, no. You are not supposed to listen to this episode of the Comic Box until you listen to episode 18 of the Geek to Geek podcast. You did. Well, okay then. Meanwhile, on the Comic Box, DC embraces Spotify, Batman steals a helicarrier, and I give my response to Void and Beej's comments on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Bop-a-doo, bop-a-doo, da-da-da-ba-doom, down, bow-bow-da-da-bop-a-doom, ba-da-bow-ba-ba-ba-ba-doo comics. Hey everyone, and welcome to The Comic Box, part of the Geek to Geek podcast network. My name's Rob, your friendly neighborhood comic geek, and we've got a lot of stuff, like usual. This might actually be a slightly longer episode because it's coming out late this week. I was actually out of town. I was in New Orleans for a week. This is my first time there. I want to say it was a cool town, but it was like 95 degrees, and I'm from Minnesota, so I was completely dying and sweating to death the entire time I was there. So it's a neat town, but it was also a very hot and sweaty town. So apologies for the late episode, but that just means we have all sorts of stuff to bring to you guys, so let's go straight into some news. Over at Marvel, they're releasing more teaser images for whatever this next Marvel Now event is. I'm guessing this is what happens after Civil War II. They started the teaser images with like this fractured Marvel Now logo, and now there's a series of images that feature two characters, almost like a face card, like on playing cards, where you have two characters and one is, their head is one direction, the head is the other direction, they're sort of split off at the waist, and then the images are like broken, like shattered glass or something like that. I'll throw a link in the show notes. None of them really mean anything to me. I don't know why they paired certain characters with other characters. It kind of feels like DC will release teaser images that actually give you clues, and Marvel just likes to release teaser images. But link in the show notes, so go ahead and check that out if you're excited for what comes after Civil War II. Over at DC Comics, they're embracing Spotify. They have made official playlists for Wonder Woman's 75th anniversary, along with playlists for individual issues. They made one for DC Rebirth number 1, along with the Rebirth specials of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lanterns, Green Arrow, Flash, Aquaman, and Titans. So each of those has their own playlist, and then there's also a playlist for the newly renumbered Action Comics and Detective Comics. My understanding is that was all okayed by DC. I believe they're official DC, but there's no word on whether the creative teams of those books had any input on the music. Link to that as well in the show notes, so if you're a Spotify listener, go check them out. Both Marvel and DC have been throwing out just a ton of variant covers lately, because apparently it's the 90s again. But it seemed like everybody backed off of variant covers for a while, and I don't know if it's because the industry is picking up, or they're just making money off of these things because there's a lot of number ones coming out as they continually sort of reboot franchises. But there's a ton of variant covers that are continuing to come out. There's really too many to list, but I wanted to draw particular attention to a series that Marvel is putting out with the American Cancer Society in September in honor of National Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. I just think that's kind of a really interesting combination. I suppose the demographic of comics is skewing older males reading comics, but is it the right audience? It seems kind of weird to have prostate cancer comic book covers, but, it's always good to spread awareness and education of any type of cancer. So I'm sort of stuck at this cross between being like, I don't know why there's a prostate cover for my comic book, and also being like, oh, hey, good for you, you're spreading awareness. Maybe it just seems like kind of a weird mix. Or maybe I'm just nostalgic for those old comic books you would find in the doctor's office where they fight bad guys that represent, cigarettes. Or, God forbid, if anybody remembers this, there was a Batman OnStar comic where Batman uses OnStar to help him catch criminals because apparently he does not know his way around Gotham City streets. So this is better than that, we'll say that. But anyway, lots of variant covers, so if you're the kind of person that loves to collect those, be excited. There's a new Inhuman character getting his own series in October. The character was teased back in April by Marvel saying, "Who is Mosaic?" And it's an Inhuman who finds himself without a body, who needs to occupy other people's bodies to survive. So basically a Marvel version of DC's Deadman, except the character is black and not dead. Trying not to be dead, I guess. The reason I mention this, because there's always new characters and new comics coming out, the reason this is interesting is they're putting out a free 10-page origin story that you can pick up at Barnes & Noble stores on August 6th. So I'm not sure exactly why this character in particular deserves a free 10-page story. I don't know if it's going to be maybe part of a big event that Marvel is putting out soon. But hey, free comics is always good. Speaking of free comics, might be too early to talk about Halloween. It's never too early to talk about Halloween. But Halloween Comic Fest 2016 has been officially announced. It's been going on for a while now. Basically, this is your second free comic book day of the year. Comic companies publish a bunch of Halloween-themed or Halloween-friendly comics and mini-comics, and then sometimes stores will put out free candy or there's a big costume contest that you can enter. So this year, there are 19 full-size comic books, 13 kid-friendly mini-comics, and there's an official announce video on YouTube that puts up all the titles of this year's comics. I will leave a link for that in the show notes. Over in the Millarverse, Mark Millar. Millarverse? Millar World? It's Millarverse, isn't it? Mark Millar, the guy that makes all sorts of things that get turned into movies, is returning to the Kick-Ass series. It's been a few years since he had a Kick-Ass comic, so he's going back to it, except this time it is with a black female character as the new Kick-Ass. And then he's also doing a first story arc of a new Hit Girl ongoing. He's not going to be the ongoing writer, but he's going to write the first few issues. Both of those are coming out in January. So if you're a fan of the Kick-Ass series, you have 2 comics you can look forward to. Moving over to movie news. In the Justice League, we have an official synopsis of the film and some new information on Batman's new vehicles, which seem kind of like they just really want more toys to make, which makes sense because that's what they do. They need to make toys, so everybody has to get a new outfit and that sort of thing. But first, here is the synopsis. Oh, even before the first thing. So pre-first thing. Justice League is no longer going to be a 2-parter. I don't recall if this was new news or if this has been out for a while. But good for them for not splitting up a movie. They should be good enough storytellers where they don't need to do that. So here's the synopsis, and I'm going to read it directly here in my, I'm going to read it in my movie voice. Okay.
Fueled by his restored faith in humanity and inspired by Superman's selfless act, Bruce Wayne enlists the help of his newfound ally, Diana Prince, to face an even greater enemy. Together, Batman and Wonder Woman work quickly to find and recruit a team of metahumans to stand against this newly awakened threat. But despite the formation of this unprecedented league of heroes, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Cyborg, and The Flash, it may already be too late to save the planet from an assault of catastrophic proportions.
So that's the synopsis. Basically, it sounds like we're getting Darkseid. We saw sort of the mother box. There was the whole deleted scene that was released from Batman v Superman. And we saw parademons. I mean, the whole dream sequence in that is clearly Darkseid stuff. There was the big Omega symbol. So everybody's going to get together and fight the big bad. We'll see how close it is to maybe, I believe the first New 52 run of Justice League was a big fight of all of them getting together and fighting Darkseid. But this doesn't mention Green Lantern. So as a Green Lantern fan, I'm actually kind of cool with it. I'd much rather see sort of a Green Lantern standalone with the Green Lantern core before I see them thrown into the mix just because I'm a Green Lantern nerd. And Void can say what he wants. I want my origin story, and I want one that's better than the one we got in the Green Lantern live-action film. The Green Lantern animated movie was great. Anyway, second part of Justice League movie news. Batman is getting a couple new vehicles. There was an interview, I think, with designer Patrick, I'm going to pronounce this right, Tatopoulos, who was also the production designer on the Underworld movies, which I'm okay with because I actually like the design of those. He also directed the prequel Underworld movie, the third one, but we'll ignore that for now. But Justice League, Batman's getting 2 new vehicles, it sounds like, in addition to a much beefier Batmobile because, I mean, clearly if he's, has a restored faith in humanity, it's important for him to have a vehicle with more guns so he can kill more people. But anyway, Batman's new vehicles is a Bat Spider, that's what I'm calling it. They're calling it the Nightcrawler, and a Bat Shield Carrier, really, which they're calling the Flying Fox. So the Nightcrawler basically sounds like it's those robot dog things you see with the spindly legs so that it can run around. So it's got spider legs, it can crawl up walls, has a tiny cockpit. Sounds like nothing you would expect a Batman to use or see Batman using. So it really just feels like it's supposed to be a wind-up toy for kids. And then the Flying Fox, which is some giant aircraft with multiple floors on it and is serving as, I think, supposed to be like a mobile base for the Justice League. So, yeah, it's a helicarrier. It's, it's not shaped like a helicarrier, but it's a helicarrier. So I think the idea is they're supposed to be old Wayne Tech things that are repurposed for the Justice League, but it's for toys. Also, fun news from the Justice League movie, The Flash is Jewish. So this has been mentioned before in the comics, but apparently the only time it was really explicitly stated was the 1989 special issue Christmas with Superheroes. But in a clip that was shown to press that went to visit the set for Justice League, Barry Allen refers to himself as a very attractive Jewish boy. So we know at the very least we officially have a Jewish character in the Justice League movie. Over in Marvel movie news, a Spider-Man animated movie is on its way, but it's going to be a while. It's slated for a December 2018 release, and they're keeping things really close to the chest on this one. They're not really telling us anything, but it's rumored to be a Miles Morales Spider-Man movie, which would be pretty cool. All we know is that it's going to exist independently from the live-action MCU, so it's not going to be related to those movies at all. I don't know if that means it's going to be a straight-to-DVD thing. I don't know if it's going to actually come out into theaters. If they're smart and it's good, they should do a cinematic release, I think, though, because people would pay money to see that, especially today when Spider-Man's such a big deal. On to the reviews. First, we're going to start with Buffy Season 10, number 28. I don't know if I've done a Buffy comic review yet, actually. This is one of the few series that I still buy in issues, though I'm probably going to quit once this season is done. This is a continuation of the TV series, which ended after 7 seasons, and now we are on Season 10. So there's been lots of changes in the Buffyverse. If you're a Buffy fan, I guess just go online and check it out. I mean, there's so much stuff. Dawn and Xander we're traveling through different dimensions. Buffy's back together with Spike. Giles is a preteen. Willow was working as an advisor for the U.S. military. Andrew finally came out of the closet, and this issue in particular, we're really sort of coming in on the last few issues of Season 10. So the gang is getting together. We're starting to figure out what they're going to do to take on the big bad. And then Buffy and Spike need to take a big chunk of time to talk about their relationship. This issue felt very rushed, like it's been a very long season. We're on issue 28. And it feels like we've had a lot of ups and downs where there were several points that could almost be the climax of the season, and they could have just launched us into a big final battle there, but didn't, and sort of brought us back down and up and down. So it almost feels like it's going on a little too long. I almost wish we had ended it and just called some of this plot the next season, because they can do that. It's comic books now. So while it's important to have a feel of the television show, I think it's also okay to have a longer narrative so long as we're getting very clear arcs. And I just feel like with this season, we haven't had that quite as much. Next up is Harley Quinn number 29, in which Harley has a giant robot fight with someone for some reason. And, of course, her robot looks like Harley Quinn. And I guess it's supposed to be outrageous. Fun is kind of the idea, but maybe it's just me. The series feels like it's kind of wearing thin, where it's supposed to be this outrageous, fun time, but I don't really ever find myself laughing so much as I do just kind of going, yeah, I guess that joke was okay. Especially in this one, there's some that really fell flat for me. And I almost wonder if the writers are sort of getting worn out because they're also writing Harley's Little Black Book and Harley Quinn and her gang of Harleys. And so at this point, I'm kind of thinking I'm going to jump off of Harley Quinn when it relaunches in August with its own sort of number 1 rebirth. I don't know if it's getting a rebirth issue, but it's relaunching with the number 1 in August. And so at this point, I'm really thinking I'm going to jump off. My favorite Harley Quinn series was still the first self-titled series, which was, I want to say, written by Paul Dini. And it was, I think, a lot more fun, a lot more true to the character as people knew her from the cartoon and that sort of thing. Wonder Woman number 1. All right, I admit it. I picked it up. I read it. It's Greg Rucka. And man, there's some really nice art in this from Liam Sharp. This issue introduces the Year 1 story arc, so I'm guessing it's going to be another sort of retcon origin story. The whole theme of the Rebirth issue is that she doesn't really know what her origin is anymore, and I don't know if that's just them saying, hey, there's been too many retcons, so we're going to do another retcon to fix it, which feels like a Hawkman solution for those of you that know what I'm talking about. But I think I'm still going to pick up issue number 2 at least. I might write it out through the first story arc and just see if it's really going to hook me, just because I love Greg Rucka so much. Doctor Strange number 9. This is part 4 out of 5 for the Last Days of Magic arc. Really, this feels like a combination of the Godkiller arc from Thor God of Thunder and the Lights Out run in Green Lantern, where they were running out of the emotional spectrum, so they only had so much Green Lantern power, I guess, to use. So Doctor Strange has gathered together the other Marvel magic users and the last few bits of magic he could find in an effort to fight off the big bad of this arc. And really, it's a fun book. It's reading kind of like this suspense adventure thing, even though there's elements of, the supernatural and horror in it. So far, I'm saying it's worth a read. It's worth picking up. But as with a lot of things that I say for comics now, I would almost suggest holding off and waiting for the first trade to come out and then picking it up, because that's going to give you an idea if this version of Doctor Strange is what you're going to want to see. I also feel like it's probably going to be short-lived because we have the Doctor Strange movie coming out, and no way that's not going to affect the comic book. So wait for the trade, but pick it up. I'm liking it, so should you. Mighty Thor number 8, also by Jason Aaron. In this issue, S.H.I.E.L.D. brings in Jane Foster to interrogate to see if she knows who the new Thor is. The fun bit, obviously, being Jane Foster is the new Thor. So eventually they get a picture they think that might be evidence of who the new Thor is. But honestly, it's just nice to get back to the Jane Foster stuff after the last couple issues of Loki telling this story about Thor in the past. But definitely this is part of a larger narrative. This isn't a standout issue in itself that I'd say, oh, this issue is so great. I think it's just setting up more things to come. The series really has slowed down since those first couple arcs of the previous God of Thunder run. But I will say that I did like the first arc of this female Thor run before they went into the Secret Wars stuff that, made the book stop and relaunch and move into Thor's for a while. So for the comic of the week, because I forgot and didn't pick one of those, I'm just going to make my comic of the week the Chase graphic novel, because I'm still trying to read it. I didn't take it with me when I went out of town. That was kind of a mistake on my part, but it's a really thick trade, and I already had heavy bags. That's totally a bad excuse. But I'm still reading it. I'm still trying to get through it. I am enjoying it, and I do enjoy the art, but I got to get through that book. So I'm going to make that my comic of the week just to force myself to read it for next week. Pull list. All right, so this upcoming week, here's the weird thing. There's really nothing for me. There's the Dark Knight 3 Master Race, number 5, and that's it. There are other things coming out that week that I would encourage you guys to go check out. The trade, Volume 6 of Saga is coming out. You should totally get that. Captain America Steve Rogers number 2, so maybe we'll get some more answers to the whole Hail Hydra thing. Trade paperback of the Infinity Entity, which I'm probably going to pick up because Jim Starlin's Infinity anything I'm down for, even if the last couple ones have been really heady. And then there's also a lot of indie comics that are coming out this week. So I want to know, since I feel like I'm sort of winding down on a lot of these big 2 comics, what should I be reading? I'll give you the contact info at the end of the episode, but tell me, because I'm winding down and I know there's a lot of good indie comics out there, so I want your suggestions. And now for the archives. Since we're sort of talking about whether or not to get into the new Wonder Woman, I want you guys to go back and read the first volume of the New 52 Wonder Woman run by Brian Azzarello. Really, the entire run that he did was really good. It's kind of this one big ongoing story anyway. But go back and see if you can read the first couple issues on your subscription, or if you want to go and pick up the trade. I really suggest it. As somebody who's never really been a huge Wonder Woman fan, I've enjoyed the character in Justice League and that sort of thing. But I've never really read a Wonder Woman comic until the New 52. I was reading all of the big reviews and how much everybody liked it. So I went and I actually picked it up at the local library, which, oh man, totally needs to be the topic of the week one of these weeks, is comics from the library. All right, mark that on the list. Point being, go back and check out the New 52 Wonder Woman by Brian Azzarello. Topic of the week. All right, folks, here's the thing we were talking about before the episode began. If you have not listened to the MCU episode of the Geek to Geek podcast, stop now, or else none of this is going to make any sense. Because I had tweeted at them that I was going to do a response episode, and they said, do it. So I said, fine. What's up, bro? What's up? Do you even comic book? Anyway, so here from the top, from my handwritten notes, I was sitting on a plane, listening to the podcast, writing down little tiny notes in my little tiny notebook. So from the top, here are the notes that I have for Void and Beej. First of all, they were talking about other movies based on comic books that had come before the MCU. Totally left out some big ones that a lot of people don't even know are movies based on comics, like Men in Black, Road to Perdition. A lot of people, for whatever reason, forget that Blade is actually a Marvel superhero movie. And then Aliens vs. Predator. It was actually a comic book before Predator 2, which is why they had the alien skull in Predator 2. It was a nod to the comic book. Next note. Beej said he liked the Ben Affleck Daredevil. You poor man. Poor man. Also, we're just going to focus on Beej here, and then we're going to move over to Void stuff. So he says that Iron Man, he talks about him not really being a major Marvel character. Kind of true prior to the first movie, but what he's forgetting is that Iron Man has always been a main fixture of the Avengers. He was one of the founding members, so when you think Avengers, you always include Iron Man in that. And he also had a really cool cartoon in the 90s where he had a mullet, and it had this really almost like metal theme song. And most importantly, these really cool action figures, some of which I still own, which are still on my shelf. So the show was part of the Marvel Action Hour along with the Fantastic Four cartoon. So I will say that even though maybe he wasn't super duper well known as, say, a Spider-Man or a Wolverine, he was definitely still a recognizable character because he had this cartoon with these really cool action figures. And I also want to make the point that Iron Man isn't really that odd of a choice for the first Marvel movie, because consider, unlike all of these other characters, Iron Man is the one who's rooted in some form of realism. So he's sort of their version of the Dark Knight Batman, in which he's an inventor who creates his own stuff. There's no superpowers evident at all in the movie, which even, you have to admit, Captain America, sort of, it's supposed to be peak of human physical condition, but basically Captain America has superpowers. So it was best, if they're going to start crafting the MCU, to start with a character that is grounded in some form of reality to give you sort of a sense of what this Marvel Comics cinematic universe is going to be like. Also, Beej says he likes Age of Ultron, which I guess I get. I mean, there's some stuff in that movie that's good, but it's such a mess of a plot. And it was really, I feel, probably ruined by the studio who wanted to cram so much extra crap into the films to tease later things, which is almost the same as Civil War. Though I did really like Civil War. Civil War is an awesome movie. I have only seen it the one time, but you can tell that a lot of that stuff was just crammed in there for the sake of adding other stuff in. You could totally jump from Act 1 to Act 3 of Civil War with only Captain America, Bucky, Iron Man, and Zemo, and have the same basic plot. I think the studio getting involved and adding in too much stuff sort of weighs down the movies, and I think that's really what we saw with Age of Ultron. Moving over to Void. Void, you're wrong. Daredevil Season 1 is amazing, and it needed to be ultra-violent because we're supposed to be like the main character, Matt Murdock, in questioning whether his actions are okay. That's why they're talking about he's letting the devil out, which means he just has anger issues and he's taking it out on criminals. So it's so over the top because we're supposed to be taken aback. It's kind of like the first RoboCop, how it was a commentary on violent films and stuff, is we're supposed to not just be, wow, this is super great because he's beating the hell out of people. We're supposed to be taken aback because, oh, like that feels like he's going a little bit too far, which is why in Season 2, they progress things by introducing the Punisher, who goes even further. And again, we have to ask the question of whether it's right or wrong for them to be taking that action. Because by Season 2, Daredevil has the costume, and we're like, oh, we're okay with him beating the heck out of people now. So now the next question is, well, if we're okay with people getting beaten nearly to death, are we okay with them being killed if they're criminals? So that's why Season 1 of Daredevil is actually awesome, because it's exactly what it needed to be for us to understand the basis of this character on the inside. And then season 2, just like the second movie, just like the second Spider-Man, the second X-Men, is you get the first thing out of the way and then we get to explore the character deeper, but they need to build that base up first. So I know Void was talking about not liking origin stories, and I do agree for some of the more well-known characters, especially ones that we've seen different origin stories in the past, so we don't need to keep rehashing it. Maybe you put it in the intro for new fans or something, but it doesn't need to be the whole movie. I can jibe with that. But sometimes you need to do it to set up what comes next, and it's important to know that right now, a lot of these movies are being put together as a longer narrative. So each film itself, and I'll get to this a little bit later, but each film itself isn't necessarily meant to be on its own, or each season in this case is necessarily meant to be its own thing, which is why you have shows like Arrow, which it starts out, very violent and stuff, but then that just gives the character a place to go. And since they know that the audience is going to stick around with these established properties by now, like it kind of sucks that they're able to say that, but they're like, come on, it's a Marvel movie. We know you're going to watch it anyway, and we're going to make, $1 billion. So they can say this movie is just a stepping stone, and we're all okay doing it. Why? Because it's proven. Because we'll watch, Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1 and Deathly Hallows Part 1. They're just stepping stones to the complete story, but people are still willing to go. Also, a random fun fact on just things that Void was talking about, how much he loves Jessica Jones. Fun fact, in the comic books, her lawyer, when she gets pulled into the police department, is actually Matt Murdock, is the one who shows up as her lawyer. So I sort of wish they had done that. I had read the comic prior to the Netflix show, and I was really hoping they would integrate that element, but they didn't. So maybe we'll see that at some point in the future. Now, things for both of you guys, just random other notes of mine. As far as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is concerned, really seems like it did kind of get a lukewarm response by most people. I personally only watched the first episode, and at the end when they talk about being a family, and it's only been one episode, it's kind of like, come on, Whedon, you're really pushing it a little too hard. It took time for the Firefly crew to become a family. Like, that's the whole point, is they have to go through things first in order for them to become cohesive. So I jumped off of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. really early. I keep being told to watch it. I also have friends that tell me that it's worth watching. Maybe I'll get to it this summer, but I'm not really, holding my breath until I get to do that. As far as Agent Carter is concerned, I've always wanted to see Agent Carter, but Hulu is dumb. And they only carried the last couple of episodes. So when my wife and I finally said, hey, let's go and watch some Agent Carter and start from the beginning, we couldn't do that. So thank you, Hulu. You are terrible. And why do people pay for you when you still show them ads? Doesn't matter. Next note, upcoming films. Yes, I agree. We are probably going to see deaths in Infinity War, which happens in the comics as well. In the comic books, Captain America has been replaced multiple times, including by Bucky and currently by Falcon. Pretty much everyone else in the Avengers lineup has been replaced by another person wearing their outfit or calling themselves that name, including, right now, there's a different Hulk. There's a totally different character who's the Incredible Hulk right now. So I don't see it as anything except an opportunity to go on and tell more stories and be able to spend more money on the production rather than on the actors. As far as a lack of a sense of wonder in Civil War versus the first Avengers movie, both Void and Beej were talking about how much they loved the first Avengers, and I just got to say, you guys, Spider-Man. I did have some good geek moments for Avengers, but when Spider-Man shows up and steals Cap's shield, even though it's in the trailer, and you just see all those characters on screen together, I had such an inner 10-year-old geek out, just geek joy moment when that happened. It was like, because you just have to be able to sit back and say, never did I think I would actually see this in a way that was good. Like, I remember the Captain America movie from the early 90s where he's got rubber ears. So seeing this level of filmmaking and this level of production quality with something that I loved so much as a kid and still enjoy today, I had such a geek moment. So yes, there was some of that in Avengers, but while that movie does more or less hold up, I still have issues now with Captain America's, I'm going to call it his onesie, where he's got that hood and it covers his ears. It just looks so weird now that you have such that better looking outfit with the helmet. I know that's kind of a petty thing to put me off of the first Avengers, but when my wife and I went back and rewatched it a while ago, the whole time I just kept staring at that hood that Captain America was wearing that served no purpose whatsoever. Lastly, my thoughts on the MCU in general. Part of me, the movie fan, the film nerd, doesn't really like what they're doing because so many of these films just feel like stepping stones rather than their own movies with us. Like, they have their own self-contained stories, but they really feel like they're only there to serve as a setup for something bigger, which I guess is okay. But, I mean, as a comic book fan, I'm more okay with that because that makes it basically like seeing a comic book series, except the millions of dollars are spent on hundreds of millions are spent on each issue. So it's where, okay, some of these are better than others, but it's meant to be viewed as a tapestry of stories and this big, as they call it, a cinematic universe instead of individual films. So it's kind of like you don't talk about having a favorite individual issue unless you're a huge comic nerd, because yes, we do have those as well. But it's the idea that picking a favorite Marvel movie is kind of like picking a favorite individual issue. You're much more likely to pick a favorite series of movies at this point, just like you would pick a favorite character or series or story arc in the comics. So it's such a unique thing that they've done to create this large universe. But part of me, the film nerd in me, still wishes that each film themselves could stand on their own as a really good piece of filmmaking and storytelling, and I just feel like that's not necessarily true. Though I also have my standouts. I do like the first Avengers. I do like the Captain America movies. Civil War was really good. I also really liked Winter Soldier. And I honestly don't know. I think my favorite Marvel movie would probably still be the first Iron Man, just because it is infinitely rewatchable. Everything in that movie was done so well, even though it's such sort of a stereotypical plot. Like, that had to be such a good film in order to set up everything else. So I guess if I needed to say a favorite, I would say Iron Man, maybe followed by Civil War, just because of some of the stuff they did in there so well, even though I have my problems with Civil War too. But that might become its own podcast, because I have been prattling on long enough. So we're going to call that it for this week's topic of the week. Response done. Bow, 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 do dabba do, bow, 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 chicka wow, wow, bow, 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 doop, doop, wow. So that is it for this week on the Comic Box, everybody. Please don't forget, listen to the other podcasts in the Geek to Geek podcast network. Obviously, the main Geek to Geek podcast was required listening for this week, but don't forget, check out the other ones. Links are in the show notes, and you can also go to geektogeekcast.net. Look in the show notes, because I'll have a link there where you can actually sign up for updates on each one of the Geek to Geek podcast network shows. And you're going to want to do that, because all of the podcasts are amazing, especially this one, which you can tell other people about by leaving me a star rating or a review on iTunes. It is the best way to get the word out about this podcast. So if you like it, please do share the love. And I really want to hear from you guys. I want to know what I'm doing well, what I can work on, and especially this week, I want to know what indie comics you guys think I should read, because I always want to get into them, and a lot of times I'm just, despite my own advice, afraid to pull the trigger. So I am on Twitter at Noby. That is at KNOWBY, or you can email me at thecomicboxpodcast@gmail.com. So this is Rob, your friendly neighborhood comic geek, closing the Comic Box, and we will see you guys next time. The Comic Box, do podcast, do da ba da bow. Going on too long. Should have stopped a little while ago, but do the Comic Box, do podcast. Seriously though, Bourbon Street, not a single comic book store. Lots of bars, no comic book shop. So, fix that.